these founders have been building in the space industry for several years, so it's not like they're trying to catch a wave, but rather they've been instrumental in making this wave happen. And so, Jeff at GT Law, the mic is yours.
All right, thanks everybody for your attention. We got a great panel today here. My name is Jeff Chiow. I am an attorney at Greenberg Traurig. I spent about a decade in the Marine Corps, F-18 backseater, then became an attorney doing government contracts and focusing that on the defense, aviation, and space industry. Through our work over the last few years, I've met a lot of amazing space companies and space founders, and we've got them on the stage here today. So I don't think I'm going to try to do an intro. I more want to have them just tell you who they are and what their company does, and we can get right into it. So David, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm David Kervin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Proteus Space. We basically are providing rapid access to space, and we're doing that via rapid prototyping, and we're doing that via an automated computational engineering system that we've developed. So we've developed a computational system that will automatically produce digital models and twins of custom satellites, and that aids greatly in also being able to rapidly manufacture and produce those satellites. So we're trying to find designs that work, that will close national security and commercial missions 30 times faster than today. An example of that is we're building a satellite right now for Air Force Research Laboratory Space Vehicles Directorate with NASA JPL payloads. From the day we started until the time we fly will be about 13 months. Typically that takes about 5 years. So we're moving fast in that arena.
That's great. And hearkening back to Tim's point, is space different than defense tech? You know, being able to manufacture things quickly that we need for the fight, that's a key part of it, obviously.
I'm trying to say there's only one space customer, and it's the U.S. government.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Matt?
Hey guys, good to be here. Matt Shieh, co-founder, CEO at Canopy. Prior Air Force guy, B-52 weapons officer, and then spent some time in Europe as early as an officer. Started Canopy about 4 years ago. We're a critical materials and manufacturing company developing highly proprietary components for a lot of space, defense, power, and energy systems. So what does that mean exactly? We manufacture high-precision small components that go in propulsion systems, hypersonics, conventional missile systems, reentry systems, propulsion, and kind of so on. So a lot of opportunities within the industrial space right now. Manufacturing as a whole is at a deficit. We focus specifically on ceramics as a material class, and we're developing a material layer, our own proprietary materials, unique manufacturing processes, as well as a software layer on top of that to optimize the design for manufacturability process as a whole. So, yeah.
That's great. Carrie?
Yeah, Carrie Marshall. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Rebel Space Technologies. Prior enlisted Air Force signals analysis, and then I moved over to the officer side as space launch, and then offensive space and cyber operations. So we are building specifically a very needed thing. In the current state of the world, we're having a lot of blind spots when it comes to how we're operating in space in terms of cyber and electronic warfare, and even honestly just day-to-day environmental problems. So we're building a platform that helps space companies essentially have the knowledge of what is happening around them, around their operations, around their satellites, around their links, and give them the ability to respond to threats. There is a growing amount of data. There's a growing amount of operators in space right now, and it's getting very contested. It's getting geopolitically very interesting, and we really lack the basic tools to do what we do on the ground, to protect our networks, to protect our infrastructure, protect our communications, and that's what we're building at Rebel Space.
Great. We have 3 veteran founders on stage here. Everybody's a veteran. I'm going to have them talk a little bit about that, but before we do that, who here is a veteran founder? By a show of hands. Okay. Who's a founder in the space industry? Okay, a couple folks, or a space adjacent maybe. Okay. I mean, I personally believe that space connects to everything that you do. You don't unlock your computer in the morning and start doing work unless space works, right? So we're all in some ways related to the space industry. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how you ended up on this stage and kind of what your purpose is here today as a veteran founder?
Yeah, I ran away from home at 17. I got a GED, and I had to get a general officer waiver to get into the Marine Corps. on a guaranteed infantry contract. So naturally, I'm a CEO of a space startup. You know, it was a long, winding road for me, but I always had an interest in going faster, being aggressive about innovation, making things faster, better, cheaper. That kind of led to a career where I got involved in national defense advanced technology. And so I was the head of federal at Stanford Research Institute, so I owned about $400 million of DARPA hard technology that was mostly SAP and TSSCI kind of work. Was the head of federal at Meta, which was a metamaterials flat panel antenna, and did 20 years in the Marines, about 12 years active duty, about 8 years in the reserve, infantry and counterintelligence. So, you know, just here I am. Don't quit is basically what got me here.
And I think you mentioned something about, you know, your connection to this event.
Yeah, this is a really warm place in my heart. First of all, I think most of us, when we come here, there's a at ease kind of feeling because we all have a shared experience, which I think is really cool. I was fortunate enough to be able to have dinner with a couple of Marines last night and just bonded over stories. One of us was in the same unit at different times. But in 2023, I was able to raise my seed round because of MilVet. We were told no by 150 people who thought they were smarter than us. And I was sitting in the front row here, and Sherman Williams from Academy Investor Network, Emily's here, I think, pointed at me on stage. And I happened to be sitting next to Rhett Jeppesen from JP Morgan. I didn't know it at the time. But somebody in the audience asked, does it matter whether the founder's enlisted or an officer for you to invest in them? And he pointed at me and he goes, I just wrote the first VC check for 6 figures into that guy right there, Gunnery Sergeant David Kervin. Craig Cummings, who was sitting here, was sitting about 5 rows behind me from Moonshots Capital. And he's like, right after that session, he goes, can you come downstairs and talk? And we talked. When we came up, Mike Sherbakoff and Ryan from the Veteran Fund were at the top of the stairs and said, can you come in here and talk? And a coalition of veteran funders, people who fund veterans, immediately kind of stood up around us, and we were able to pretty quickly close our seed round. I got a term sheet from Craig, you know, a week later. So I've come back every year because that's the power of this place, and I hope it happens for other people. We've raised about $9 million in seed capital to date.
That's great, Matt.
Yeah, you know, my journey's a little similar. You know, I didn't run away from school or run away from home, but it did take me 6 years for undergrad. So I do know persistence, but I think that taught me a lot. Getting into the Air Force, you know, really like establishing myself and developing some foundational fundamental skills. Getting out of the Air Force, right, had taken the business school route, but you know, still saw a lot of opportunities within industrial supply chain, manufacturing, and saw a lot of gaps, right, you know, when I was in the Air Force of, right, really hard to get more missile systems, more aircraft, right, maintenance is really hard. So then that's where I started looking at, okay, really difficult materials, right, how to commercialize those. Started connecting with the federal lab space, got connected with NASA, landed on high temperature materials as the first marketing product. These were flight heritage materials that NASA had once flown on the space shuttle program. And when that, you know, the shuttle program shut down a decade ago, a lot of that supply chain went with it, right? These were all mom and pop shops that were making this, you know, re-entry materials that are today used, you know, still on, you know, SpaceX, on Lockheed, on Straddle launch, a lot of hypersonic and rocket re-entry vehicles today. So found an opportunity there to commercialize that as our initial entry into the market, and then build IP around that manufacturing process into new materials, new components, and new industries as well. I think the journey is very similar. You know, I've been coming to build it for 3 years as well. You know, met Tim Shaw and, you know, a lot of the veteran investors here. But yeah, our first investors were here as well, PenFed, Doug Donat, Hivers. So really strong community and support network here. So, you know, always good to be back in. Just see old faces and, you know, meet new faces as well.
All right. Well, my journey's a little interesting, I guess. Until 2014, I was in the Air Force, either as an active duty member, a reservist, or a defense contractor. I'm always working in space. I worked space launch, and then I moved over to a crazy world where I was paid very well to figure out how to break all the space systems, whether from the space, electronic warfare, or cyber side. Great, had a great time. You know, got to red team. My go-by was Vader because all the weapons guys had to get through me to deploy and do their job. So it was fun. Then I got a call from an old boss who was supposed to be on this panel today and didn't make it, Lee Rosen. He's like, hey, come on over to SpaceX. I got some jobs for you and some things I'd like you to work on. So I started taking on the launch site and then eventually at Hawthorne, parts of telemetry and communications. How do we talk to our vehicles? How do we ensure success and don't have things blow up, which in 2014, they were still blowing up. And I was horrified when I got there because with all my sort of knowledge in the military, showing up and being in charge of making sure things can talk. And by the way, if you can't talk to your vehicle, it's a very bad day. It doesn't matter how well it works. You can't prove it or it's just going to blow up because you couldn't prove it was safe. So, you know, kind of a big thing. But we couldn't know. Like, things would go wrong, and it would be like, why is this wrong? Well, it just does. You know, or this old guy from the back would come out and say, oh, yeah, that's fine. Like, you know, that's what we typically see. But we didn't have the insight we needed. Fast forward to starting Rebel Space in late 2019, 2020, with the idea that let's address that gap because the world is not going to get less complex. The space systems are not going to get fewer. They're not going to get easier. We're going to, you know, we saw where we're headed with mega constellations and everything from robots and welding and everything else on orbit in a more tense geopolitical environment. So really decided to take all my knowledge and efforts and things that I learned and put that into the company to try to address that problem with a very AI-enabled type software platform that can take that GarageL analyst in your back pocket and can respond to some of the threats that are happening in real time, which I think is a very critical need going forward in the next, well, forever.
Yeah, on the topic of critical need and whether or not space companies are defense tech companies, at least some space companies are defense tech companies. What's kind of the connection between your own company or your own experience and national security? What's the urgency and what's the fit to the problem that your companies have?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that, as I said, the U.S. government is the only space customer. So you're either, if you're in space, you either are doing business with the U.S. government or you're going to be doing business. You just haven't realized. For me, my career has been, again, about national security and advanced technology and how you apply advanced technology to national security problems. So that we call that driving requirements, because the stuff that we're doing is so bleeding edge, there is no requirement written for it. Nobody's put it through the JSIDS process, which is difficult. And I think with respect to space today, it's all about China and Russia. Russia is more of a nuisance actor. China, if they said go today, we would lose. And that's because we do not have a deterrent capability other than nuclear weapons to stop them from doing what they like. And so it's about generating capability, and for us, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a capability that is centered on one thing, speed, that allows us to put things in space, to control space, to own the high ground, so to speak, so that we never have to fight that war. And that's what we get up and wake up every day trying to do.
Yeah, because of where we sit in the supply chain, we're upstream, so I get to see a lot of different industries, different companies, different capabilities. So I'll share 2 customer case studies that we're currently working with right now, and one is a defense prime making a new missile system that's the successor to the HARM anti-radiation missile. And we met them about a year ago, and they said, hey, we have 2 ceramic suppliers that we're working with right now, and they both suck. One of them takes, doesn't deliver their materials half the time. The other one charges 3 to 4x. We think you might have this, material that you took out of NASA that could work as a radome for us. So a lot of the same properties and everything. The pricing works for them. So basically sold them material. We're testing it right now. And this is very rare because this is a missile that's an LRIP 4-5, very late stage production. Usually don't get in at that part of the supply chain. But that's how bad the U.S. supply chain is for missile production. Another example is the naval industry. So speaking to a company developing sonar systems, right? They're a prime subsystem integrator. Same problem. They have 2 ceramic suppliers to work with. They're doing transducer rings, piezoelectric ceramics, difficult ceramic class. Same problems, lead time, costs, everything, and they're looking for additional suppliers. So without that, you don't have sonar capabilities, you don't have new missiles, and that starts at the material component level. I think that's where a lot of people don't realize the industrial base isn't just new integrated systems, right, which we do need, but also you got to break apart the supply chain layer by layer and really find, what are the deficiencies, what's the economic network that's involved, and then how do you de-risk that?
Do you want to talk to that, Carrie?
I think we're sitting in a little bit of a different spot on the perspective of defense tech versus space tech and how we classify ourselves, because what is GPS? Run by the Space Force, right? Classic military deployment, but absolutely everything. You cell phone to your plane, everything's relying on GPS. So from our perspective, we are well funded through, I agree, defense fund space, they are the customer. But the impact of kind of what we're doing on the space environment is global and is commercial, right? I mean, your cell phone now talks to satellites, whether it's Starlink or whatever is the next generation. I mean, it is all very, very much becoming a streamlined, unified communications environment. Our defense comm is going through commercial satellites. Those commercial satellites are also providing TV and, other kind of commercial capabilities. So when it comes to, how do we view the defense space, defense is always the early investor and the early mover because they see where things are happening and they want to have risk reduction for interruption of their services, protection of their assets. The geopolitical conflict, of course, right? I mean, what were communications, electronic warfare, all that's very defense. But those lines are blurry, and I think they're getting more blurry every day. And I think it's an interesting question, especially when you're a startup.
Right, and so as a startup, you're trying to attract capital, you're trying to grow, you're trying to figure out what problem are you trying to solve. And we've just said that there's an urgent national security problem that everybody has at least a piece of trying to solve. I think I heard between David and Matt that there's a huge problem with the industrial base being able to manufacture anything in the United States. And I think earlier we talked about sort of a lack of engineers, both for your cases, but also for Carrie's case. So if it's so urgent, if it were to happen tomorrow, or if it were to happen today, we'd lose. How are we going to get from here to there? I mean, clearly we're just going to reduce the regulatory hurdles. We're going to increase funding. If that happens from the government side only, then it's an impossibility. So you have to rely upon the commercial market, I think. What do you see the opportunity as for the next 5, 10 years in this industry? Are we going to break out and really go after that problem set?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's happening all around us. I think DoD is moving as fast as it can. I think it's setting up to move a lot faster. The acquisition system is a big problem. The way that we set up requirements and the way that we kind of DoD looks into the future and then buys things to deal with that is very slow. On our 13-month flight timeline, which will be the fastest ESPA-class satellite ever designed, built, and launched in history, our longest hurdle in that timeline is FCC licensing. It's bureaucratic paperwork that if you were to dip your eyeballs into it, you would think you were in the 1950s. So that all has to be solved as well. But it is about a speed thing, and it's what we're dealing with particularly with regard to China is if China moves on Taiwan, it takes a capability that, as you said, makes the world run. So we have to create enough potential for pain for them that they won't do that. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'd say on workforce development talent, everyone knows industrial-based manufacturing. There's going to be 2 million plus jobs that are needed in manufacturing over the next decade. America's not known for feeding people into tradecraft schools to do like manufacturing, machining, things like that. It's where a lot of the problem is our academic system is making sure people go to careers and skills that can rebuild the industrial base there. Where we think that's going to matter a lot is around, okay, how do you actually manufacture things at speed? And a lot of that is a design gap, right? We have design we have increased demand in, okay, things that need to be designed and manufactured, but we also don't have enough engineers that can integrate and do that as well. So for us, it's, we want to bridge that gap, right? We're doing a lot of workforce talent development locally as well, trying to, feed into different pipelines from local universities and bridge that gap, but then also, leveraging software, AI tools as well to increase design, shorten lead times there, so that we can manufacture things better.
And how is Rebel Space navigating that environment with workforce difficulties? What are your strategies to get to done?
Yeah, it's funny. So we start out, talking to commercial and defense customers, operators, with, hey, we want to help you protect your system, let you know what's going on, and they're like, well, can you just help us have fewer operators? Can you superpower what we have, right? Because it's really hard to say, I'm going to give you this advanced tool for a threat detection when the operator in and of itself they have no idea what they're looking for because they're brand new. Space Force is very strapped on people. And on the commercial side, there's a lot of transition to newer technologies and more complex systems. So the question we get asked is cognitive workload. Can you provide what is essentially is that grouchy old analyst, the person that you don't want to call when you're a young lieutenant because you think this might be bad, but you're not sure, and you don't know if you're going to get somebody in the back to come out and yell at you and say that's absolutely nothing, that happens every day, or why did you tell me this 10 minutes ago? And that's the kind of capability that we're bringing first and foremost most to the space operations community.
And you've chosen to do this, to work in this industry that's known for long development timelines and high cost. It takes a long time to get anything done. It takes a ton of money. So how do you keep momentum while you're navigating that reality?
You mean business momentum or fundraising momentum, or?
Well, I think both, but really fundraising. Let's focus on that first.
Yeah, I mean, our core thesis is we're automating engineers out of the design and build process. And so our computational system basically can do the work of about 75 engineers today. And so a human engineer today, a human engineering team will sit down 18 months later, they'll have one design for a satellite. Our system in about 4 minutes can produce about 4,000 designs that all close. That all bleeds into rapid manufacturing and commoditizing who you need to build these. So high school students in a couple of years will be able to build these satellites, so you don't need a PhD to do it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, you did. You
so that's our take on it, and we're trying to just make cheaper, faster, better, like the thing, right?
Right. And Matt, do you want to talk about your own experience, and then, but also tying it into how do you raise capital? What has your capital raising experience been?
Yeah,
PTSD.
Hardware's hard.
We all start shaking. It's okay. We're with you.
Yeah, there are long timelines, right? Especially in the materials development space. Now being in this industry for several years, if you break apart, right, legacy industrial, right, materials companies like your Cornings, right, your 3Ms, the typical timeline for them to get a new material into market, like your LCD screens, right, the reason why TVs are $300-$400, it took them 5 years to get that into the market, but they have the entire market, right? I don't want to say we're going to take 5 years, right? But we do have an accelerated timeline because we work alongside, right, the government, Air Force, different agencies, because they are the ultimate end user, right? They're the biggest buyer of all of our defense space systems. But we never sell directly to them, right? We're a supplier, a component that feeds into the rest of the supply chain. So then we bring in the commercial market as well as aligned partners that build confidence as well. That's how we stay motivated. We keep the momentum. And yeah, I mean, fundraising for hardware and manufacturing as a whole, I think, yeah, there's a lot of good themes over the last year, defense and, reinvigorating manufacturing, but it's not, necessarily, the traditional venture case of, right, the type of company you invest in, but it is important. So we find ways to get creative with our capital structure. I think one of our proudest stats is, we've only taken in $4 million of investor capital today, but we've leveraged 2x government dollars. We've brought in $10 million in the last year of aligned R&D funding, and that's going to turn into, we're on another $4 million contract this year already, and ramping up for 10 to 15 or so this year. But it is a long game. But once you're in the supply chain, from a proprietary materials perspective, you're kind of set.
Carrie?
We're software, so we don't have as much issue, I think, it's not as capital intensive, right, as a lot of things that you guys are doing. But I think commonly, non-dilutive funding is your friend, especially when you're doing some things that are hard to explain. I think in space, every space startup founder has the fun time of trying to explain what they mean. And this is how space works, and this is, how you can get your money as an investor back on that space. So that's always tricky. But non-dilutive, the government is a big part of it. I think that the long timelines are an interesting point because space industry in general, the conflict between we're trying to revolutionize and do something that in the previous however many decades, is what governments did, right? It's what nation states invested in. And now the expectation, because SpaceX did this, and even by the way, I took SpaceX 20 plus years. I was a second lieutenant when I had to tell somebody that this guy, the PayPal guy, is building a rocket. We don't know why, anyway. So it takes time. And the fact that, the expectation now is that we've gotten to the point where everything's going to turn faster, and we're going to deploy capability quicker, but space is still really hard. I think everybody tends to kind of forget it till they have a failure. And so you need patient capital. You need people to understand where they can put their money effectively and where we can go faster and where you can have the most impact. I think a lot of what you guys are doing on the manufacturing and supply side is really key because everybody tends to focus on the bright, shiny end of it. The space robot, the asteroid mining, whatever it is. Very cool, very science fiction, but we all need the nuts and bolts, I think, and the infrastructure to help us get there because that's where the need is today.
Elon's biggest problem is space reentry and getting the right materials to work right now.
Oh, yes, I know.
So we're here at a startup conference. There's a lot of founders here, and they're only a handful said they were startup founders in the space sector. If you were going to try to encourage more of them to raise their hand, what things might you say about it? For me, space is just cool. I've often said, if you could work with veterans every day, why wouldn't you? And if you could work in space every day, why wouldn't you?
Are those the two questions?
Yeah.
I would always prefer to work with veterans. It's the terminology, the lexicon, the shared experience, the drive, the ambition, the alignment, all of that makes things go a lot faster. I constantly am having to explain to my team what SMEAC means and things like that. And in terms of space, space, I say space, we say in our company, space is not hard, but it's unforgiving. And it's kind of like that being in a space business where there's a hardware component to it, because one little thing on a satellite that is done incorrectly will destroy the entire mission, and it's a total loss. So these are no-fail missions that we're on, which is great for veterans. A lot of us have experience in no-fail missions. And we're very astute as the capital that we've raised. I don't want to go raise $150 million. I'm not that guy, number one, that's going to tell you that we're doing $1 trillion company. But I look at venture capital as a loan of sorts that I'm responsible for. And I think that's why some people invest in veterans, is because we have a different attitude about it. I think that it's just, space is very unforgiving. Raising money in a space company is a very unforgiving process. And, you just have to wake up every day and not take no personally and brush it off and start again. That's it.
Yeah, I think, question about, working with veterans. Veterans as a asset class, right, if you will. I was talking to Doug about this yesterday, right? Veterans are, we all took the same oath, right? Same core values, very trustworthy, right? We can look to your left to right, and you can count on that person. Getting out, started working the private sector, and there's a lot of dishonesty out there. I think veterans are great to work with, and I would encourage a lot of veterans to go into space and defense sector as a whole. Space is an unlimited playground. A lot to do out there, and still a lot to build, but it is one of the hardest sectors, I think, but I think also one of the most rewarding as well.
So we're about 30% veterans right now. It's pretty critical to have people that understand the mission that you're selling into in the defense side, for sure, right? That's pretty key. I think advice for people thinking about getting into space, or veterans getting into space. What I have trouble finding technical people coming out of the military, and I know that's a foundational problem. It is, Air Force, Space Force. I don't know how it is in the other services, but it's hard. And so, I'm always excited when you see somebody who wants to start a company and it's a veteran and they have that understanding of operations. They understand their customer, right? They understand who they're coming from. And I think you have to lean into that. I think that's a superpower. I think this conference has been really good highlighting that, because if you have a good idea and you understand your defense customer first, you already have a leg up in knowing how to get non-dilutive funding. You know how to speak their language. And that's just something that you shouldn't discount, and you shouldn't let the general environment tell you it's not valuable, because it really is.
There's a lot of talk about dual use at this conference, and of course that is it's a key strategy that I think venture capital likes to pursue. How do you convince people for these capital-intensive things that you're trying to do in space, big things in space, to give you money?
So when I said there's only one space customer and it's the government, what I meant by that is in terms of the TAM that a U.S. space company can address, 90% of that in dollars, 95% of it, maybe 98, is the U.S. government. And so some investors have a dual-use thesis mandate in spending their funds. You have to prove you're a dual-use company. I think the commercial market is going to be gigantic, and I think it's starting now. You see people sending things to the moon. There's 2 lunar rovers on the way to the moon right now. There's 22 satellites in orbit around the moon. It's on. Like, that's happening. In our lifetimes, we're going to see people mining things on the moon and using them. So as long as you can address the future, you're good. We're also, I think we just closed our first big commercial deal today with a big public company, and that is a B2B transaction, which the government considers to be a commercial transaction, even if the money came from the government to that prime contractor. So that's another dual-use perspective. We're also really lucky. We have SAIC invested in us. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. They're one of our major investors, and they're just amazing. They've been able to facilitate my security clearance. They're facilitating a facility clearance for us. And it's a big company that knows how going to market works. It's an immense help to a company like us from a dual-use perspective, because they have both commercial and government work. So having investors who know how to do that is important, I think.
I'd say I'd point back to getting creative with the cap structure and how you take in capital. It's not all just equity fundraising at the beginning. It's a lot of non-dilutive government dollars, right? Building those partnerships, and those are strategic, but they do fund the company. Starting to bring in revenue, commercial dollars as well. That's how we convince current investors, new investors as well. But then also pointing directly to the government, right? There's a lot of funding out there if you know where to get it. Especially within manufacturing today, Office of Strategic Capital, right? A lot of people know, they're building a lot and supporting a lot into components, materials, as well as things like the Defense Production Act, which has funded about $500 million over the last year into the supply chain, and they continue to support the supply chain there. But there's a lot of really creative ways to build a company like this. That in turn is actually more capex light. Like percentage-wise, like OpEx, people are still like our most expensive asset, right? We do spend quite a bit on machinery and our facility, but really specialized engineers doing what we do expect to get paid a lot. So people are still going to be expensive. Yeah.
I think, we're what we build is generally applicable to a lot of different things. We talk to air operators. We fall into a cyber kind of capability. That if you're familiar with the idea of operational technology, managed detect response solutions. We kind of fit into other aspects. But coming from the space community, and also space is shiny. Space is cool. Everybody wants to talk about launching something, and it's interesting because when it comes to dual use and how you talk about dual use, I think go back to the original statement. Yeah, the funding lines and the ROI on space does tie to the government. It does tie to defense, but you have to a lot of times make a case of where else does it apply, and it's not always a space technology. So then you get into the conversation of, are you focused? Are you doing your thing? Are you focused on space? I'm like, absolutely. First customer, it's where I'm getting a lot of my money. But you have to make that story. And I think something for early founders, if you're thinking about space and you're thinking about funding and getting investment, you have to think about those sort of related fields. Like, who else can you support, and how does that relate, and how does that stay on your roadmap and your plan?
Who can help people answer that question? Who are the folks? Is it going to be your investors? Is it going to be fellow founders? Who's going to help you figure that out? And especially, and maybe we'll stick with you, Carrie, on this. You know, if you have to go, if part of the point is to go to NASA, Space Force, et cetera, how do you get that done?
Well, I usually try to find people on my team who know people. It's all networking. I think these kind of events are a great thing. Your network is your friend. I think talking to new networks, right? Like I personally have a lot of contacts in NASA and Space Force and Air Force, but I'm pretty weak in the Army, and I've never done anything with the Marines. I have no idea. So, building up those relationships with other people is really the key thing, especially if you're trying to get into different defense networks. I think everybody knows how that works. On the commercial side, that's networking too, right? That's going to the conferences and places you might not expect. Like I think we're going to an FAA conference here next week. You know what I mean? It just, you have to really broaden your horizons and spend a little bit of time talking to a lot of different people you wouldn't normally talk to.
Yeah. You guys want to talk?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the key takeaway I took from this morning's fireside chat with Chuck, right, was that you just got to stalk, your government officials, right? No, but like we do, like it is very relationship based, right? Coming from the Air Force, I have a few of those relationships, but if we need the PEO of a major command to sign my paperwork, I'm gonna go fly there, set up a meeting with a 3-4 star general, and we have the connections now, right? Where we're doing that, and we get them to, you walk in there in general, doesn't really know what's going on anyways, right? He's got his board of 06s there, and we ended up working with them, and you get capabilities that need to be built, but I think that's what it takes to do R&D and business with the government. You have to, really develop those relationships, go to the conferences, right, meet these people in person, and then let them know that they can trust you to build a critical capability for national security.
Yeah, I mean, we're part of a virtuous insurgency, right? And so I'm running a human intelligence operation. I'm mapping the human terrain. I'm understanding who the influencers are, who the decision makers are, who's the informal power, who's the formal power. We're running the trap lines on the FAR and non-FAR acquisition methods. We spend a lot of time educating people on how they can give us money. And the long game, if you do this, it turns into this, which can turn into that. Tracking PEOs as well as the research function and everything in between. Like if you don't know how your product's going to end up in a PEO in DoD world, you probably need to get on that. There's a very simple ditty that I've always used. I've sold an enormous amount of stuff to the DoD and the government. It's know, like, trust, buy. And that's the path that we follow. They have to know who you are. They have to like you because people don't do business with people they don't like. You have to establish trust, which is always the hardest part, and it usually revolves around technical credibility, but there's also some business credibility in that too, and then they're gonna buy. And you can't skip any of those steps because it'll come back to bite you. So just try to keep it simple. I'm a Marine, so I keep it simple and in crayon.
That's right. So you mentioned SMEAC before, situation, mission, execution, admin and logistics, and comm. If you think about that, I'm going to ask you a question. Which of those is most important to you every day?
Yeah, you left out one, which is control.
Command and control, yeah.
And so you're trying to establish, I'm always trying to establish control, but I'm a control freak. Execution kills, in my opinion, execution eats everything else for breakfast. Because bad days you can wash away with contract wins. And winning, whether that's technical milestone progress of your product, whether it's getting to hire a team member, closing more funding, winning contracts, making that relentless forward progress is, to me, everything. If you're not doing execution well, the rest of it will disappear when you go bankrupt.
There's a Marine Corps advantage here because of the SMEAC, so I'll say it again. Situation, mission, execution, admin and logistics, command and control. Which is most important to your day?
I know, this is new to me too. I don't know what you're talking about.
So what was the question?
Which one of these things matters most to you? Assessing the situation as a founder, as you're going about your work every day. Assessing the situation, stating the mission, having executing that mission, the admin and logistics to get stuff done, or command and control.
We go with none of the above. I'll make up my own. Here, it's adapting, I think, to the environment, and that's what I was taught to do in the Air Force was, right, you go fly into a random country in a different environment, right, different airspace. You don't really know what's going on, but, you rely on your training and you adapt. I think, why veterans do so well in the startup, space is because we understand, right, there's a lot going on. We're constantly taking in information, recalibrating, right, taking in all these variables, and then we have to adapt, right, and recalibrate and figure out, okay, if I'm standing here now, a year from now, is that where I need to go? And then a year later, is that where I needed to end up? Or, right, did I choose the wrong path? So I think constantly understanding how do you adapt and how do you calibrate would be, where I see as like a good trait to have.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds to me like those are each very important at different stages of your company, right? I mean, I think that looks like what is the most important depends on what you're trying to do. So I can, absolutely see execution once you've already done a lot of things, once you've done your mission, you know who your target customer is. For us at the moment, we're at a stage where, it's more of a communication. What are we doing? What are we trying to solve? Getting that advocacy, getting that evangelicalizing. I can't say that. That's terrible. Evangelizing. Thank you. My brain doesn't work. So I think, those change. And I think, I would love to get to the point where the number one thing is logistics. That sounds great. If all I'm worrying about is how to keep the people and the parts going, then perfect. I think where we're at is it's really on the communication and command and control side for sure.
And it's all coming back to me now. It's been a few years since the Air Force, but we like to say our acronyms. SMEAC is what I remember recalling it.
I still don't think we have that acronym.
Yeah. So the world is changing. There's certainly a push to onshore, but you're in an industry where there's a lot of high flight heritage parts that are outside the United States for various reasons. How does that affect those of you who are working on manufacturing, or if you're trying to get talent that's outside the United States? Is that something that you've had to navigate, and if so, how do you navigate it?
Yeah, so DoD regulation just says that the spacecraft has to be assembled, integrated, and tested in the United States. You can actually source foreign parts, and we have actually some treaty-based allies that have preferential treatment for import. Germany, for example, NATO allies, Japan, AUKUS, things like that. So there's an international ecosystem of supply chain there that's growing and stabilizing and becoming more commercially available, which all accrues to speed. And the talent part, we're automating the talent out. I think that what a lot of people don't understand is like AI is automation and knowledge management. Automation is eating the world, and we are literally creating a system that will replace many technical engineering disciplines that's extensible to other types of structural design. And there's a gigantic trend and wave face behind that. So there's a societal question that's coming as a result of automation that can actually destabilize countries. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this technology surge that we have that's focused on space and China and defense, how automation accrues to that and what happens as a result of that, I think.
I think because of the nature of the work we do and a lot of the customers we work with, oftentimes we get designs, for different components and things they need to be made. And they fall within the ITAR and USML category because they are, kind of special, new components that aren't just like SKUs you just buy from a manufacturer. So because of that, there is, an issue where like you have to have a facility that can handle ITAR, right, on the IT side. And, we're one of the only companies kind of within the ceramic space doing what we're doing that is set up for that. But that's where offshoring, any kind of manufacturing for those kinds of companies and their parts is nearly impossible because of the regulations there.
I mean, anything you're doing with defense and space, I mean, you're running into this problem, right? I mean, we don't have manufacturing and supply chain issues, but yeah, we need to hire U.S. citizens, and offshoring isn't really an option. And so that is something to consider, if you're getting into the defense tech arena at all, right? I mean, it's a fundamental problem.
Okay, we're going to ask that folks make their way to the microphone so they can ask some questions. But before we get to that, what's one piece of advice for veterans looking to start or join a space technology startup? What's the one piece of advice that you might give them?
I mean, I would just say believe in yourself. I think veterans habitually self-select out and say they're not going to pick me. I will tell you that I know from experience that J.P. Morgan in their diversity and inclusion department considers veterans part of that, because we are historically don't enable ourselves to go on to great things. So I'd just say believe in yourself and don't talk yourself out of something saying you can't do it or you don't have the technical background or something like that. I have a bachelor's degree in business. My CTO is a god, technically. That's who will handle that. So just believe in yourself and get in there.
That's great.
My CTO is also a god, yeah. I also have a business background, but all the technical stuff, that's the other half of the team. Yeah, I'd say the biggest piece of advice I can give is, leverage your network, right? I think the veteran kind of affinity network is the strongest network you can have, and there are people out there to help, right? Including, right, this conference is a great place to start. I think that's what I leveraged the most was, wasn't business school, it wasn't any like specific accelerator programs. It was, the veterans that I knew and that I had in my network, and those were the ones that were willing to help me out the most.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think they said it all. Yeah.
Okay, good. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Danny Leyland with the Millvet. Thank you all for the knowledge and insights here. I'm just curious, there's been a sort of software common thread with everyone here. Very curious, with so many off-the-shelf products for specifically product development, digital thread, PLM, what were the gaps that you were seeing in the available tools and kind of going this route to include this as a core piece of your business? And then I guess question 2 would be, how are you ensuring like the seamless integration between that fast-moving software side and then the traditionally slow-moving hardware side? I used to sell CAD, PLM, CAE, so I'm super curious about this. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we do is orchestrate industry standard engineering tools, and we are agnostic to the tools. So we're generating physics anchored designs, and we're automatically arranging CADs. So part of our system mimics a human being creating a CAD, creating a line drawing, all that kind of stuff. So that's how we handle the kind of evolution of software, is that we're really a back end orchestrating whatever is out there. And I think that answers both those questions, maybe.
Yeah, I'd say like we're using all the standard CAD tools as well. I'd say for us, we're in a space where we are gathering a lot of data, right? And we're building the data sets and the models, right, to set the parameters for how we automate this process in the future. Because design in every single space with the material, the manufacturing process, and what the end component is very different. And you have to have unique data sets for that. You can't just build it off of whatever AI model is out there. You have to create it.
I think from my perspective on, we're building software ourselves, but coming out of SpaceX, the most interesting thing is that SpaceX, everything was done vertically in-house. And so, the teams at EIT and Flight Software and everybody rolled their own. Like they made new processes, they made new ways of doing things that no other company had. And then a lot of those people either left and started companies to bring that knowledge out and it's kind of spread out through the community. Or people saw how fast SpaceX was going and like, hey, wait a minute, how are they doing that? And so they also started looking at who they can partner with and what kind of software stacks that they could build. And so I think it's super interesting just from a technical perspective that a lot of the innovation you see in the software side it's being driven a little bit by SpaceX showing you what's in the realm of the possible, and that's kicked off kind of a large, in my opinion, software industry change.
Yeah, I just one more thing to say on that. Like, if you're building a software company, you better be thinking about how you create machine intelligence that learns once, implements forever, and moves at machine speed, because that's where this is already. And I remember my last company before this was an AI company. We sold about 60 million of AI to DoD. We raised a Series A for $30 million. We were getting ready to raise a Series B, and OpenAI came out of stealth, and that company was gone, like that. So that's the kind of momentum that's behind the software business right now.
Yeah, I'm going to get to your question next, but I want to tell you the question I'm going to come to you with after, which is going to be about future technologies. This pace of change that we have. I want to get some thoughts on that. But please go ahead.
Sure. So my name's Adler. My question's about workforce development. So I served on active duty in the Air Force from 2000 to 2004, and then I went to work for Lockheed Martin as a space systems engineer. Now I'm a professor and scientist at Johns Hopkins. So I have a research lab in biomedical engineering, and
So a real underachiever is what you're saying.
yeah. I say workforce development because I look at the student population we have, and like for example, my department, biomedical engineering, is ranked #1 in America, and I look at how many of those students are veterans, how many of those students are Americans, and so I think in terms of getting more people interested in engineering and sciences and STEM. If you have suggestions for how universities can do that better, and then also, are there ways for universities to collaborate better with veteran startups? We're pretty pro-veteran, so we've got the largest DoD research center in the country, and I think we do, like APL does like $2 billion a year, so there's a lot of DoD work that we do, but it tends to be with the larger companies, and so even thinking about how we can better support veteran startups, that would be great to hear.
We have a research partner that's a well-known university. The people there are fantastic. The bureaucracy is crippling. It takes 8 months to get a subcontract to them because of them. I think that there's a dinosaur industry in space. There's also a dinosaur industry in academia in America that's ripe for disruption that would solve some of these problems.
Yeah, so we do work with quite a few academic partners on a number of different materials, and we're pretty intentional with it. We go directly to them, right? We develop a relationship with the professors, and we bring a lot of capital to the table as well, right? Because they only have limited funding, right, by the university, the department, but we bring in additional capital from the government. We say, hey, we're going to build this together, right? We'll co-develop IP. That's a win for both of us. But say, we also have a lot of universities that reach out to us in our material space, and we turn certain ones away because there's no relationship there, and we already have partners that we work with. We work with some of the best material scientists in the world. At a few of these universities that we work with, let's say if you have specific capability and there's a startup or a company or someone that's building it in the commercial space, then I think you should directly go reach out to them, develop a relationship, and say, hey, like, here's what we're doing on our side. I'd like to understand more of what you're doing. Maybe we go after some federal funding dollars together and build a capability together.
So I would love to have more interns and more cooperation on that side with academia. But there tends to be a couple of problems. I mean, I think kind of touched on a little bit. It's relationships, but it's IP, right? And so how universities structure their IP agreements is really, really important because that is a non-starter for most people that are running a technical company. And then second, the way thing I have seen worked is to get I've seen successful pieces of it where they have interns and they manage them at the college themselves. I think University of New Mexico has a great program like this where a lot of the heavy lift, if you get past the IP struggles, is the sort of human resource management workforce problem where I have a very junior person in college that's going to take a lot of my time or a lot of my engineers' time to get them productive, right? To get them up to speed, to give them that experience. So as much as we want to do that, I think the hurdles in how you set up that program is a little bit hard. And so, I mean, my recommendation is, I don't know if your school has it, Johns Hopkins has it, but carve that out as a program. And I know some of these programs have, they have facility clearances, they get their students, even top secret clearances, and they manage the people, and then they have good IP agreements. And I think once you have that, I think you can work with just about anyone, and it'll be a productive relationship.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. Do you think, so we're sponsoring a health tech accelerator in Florida for veterans. Would it make sense to do something like that in space as well? Or do you feel like there's a lot of resource already out there for people who are very early stage that are trying to start space tech companies?
I think accelerators are always good and educational. I mean, there are quite a few that are out there. I think it would depend what you're trying to do. Are you trying to bring startups in to mentor, or are you trying to do the accelerator for the students?
Yeah, I'd be bringing startups in to mentor.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are plenty of startups that always will be jumping an opportunity for advice and mentoring and that kind of environment. Again, that's always, again, structural. How do you set that up? You know, what do you ask, and non-dilutive, all those kinds of things.
I mean, I think, I don't know if there's a need. Being in space, you're in deep tech. And so there's a lot of deep tech avenues, and it's a physics-based field. It has to obey the laws of physics. I think there are a lot of startup ideas that don't obey the laws of physics and probably should never get funded. There's a lot of silly ideas in space startups that just won't close. But I think deep tech, which space is a subsector of, has an enormous amount of resource out there. So if you're starting a space company and you're looking for investors or accelerators or things like that, look at who's doing deep tech, and you'll find some resources.
Thanks.
Thank you. So my final question is just thinking about how much maybe this is the final question, maybe we'll get another one, who knows. Thinking about how quickly things change, what are some of the space technologies that we're going to see in our lifetimes, or really in the next 10 years, that people here may not even know that are really within reach?
I think automation and roboticization. So robotics, you can't put robotics on a lot of small volume manufacturing lines because you'll never get that CapEx expenditure back. There is no break-even period on it, or it's extremely long. But roboticized human form robots, which are coming into vogue now, will be doing the missions on Mars for a lot of reasons, radiation, stuff like that. Humans don't do well in space. We just don't. The current Dragon capsule, when it docks with the International Space Station, that's a fully automated procedure. Humans don't do that stuff anymore. And the space shuttle in its last phases had an automated landing procedure as well. So this automation and robots doing the jobs that humans used to do, I think, are going to be the two biggest things we're going to see happen in space.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a futurist and a big sci-fi nerd, so I'll go a little bit past our current timeline, because, yeah, in space manufacturing, deep space mining, I mean, data centers on the moon, you know, a lot of like technology that's being built today. But you know, if you guys aren't familiar, there's a scale called the Kardashev scale, right? Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 civilization. Tier 1 is basically, are you a planet that can harness all your resources, right? Control the weather, right, and everything. We obviously can't do that. So we're like a 0.5, barely 0.5. But then Tier 2, right, is harnessing like the power of like the solar system, your sun, right, which we're kind of just skipping to that, is like doing a lot of stuff out in space. So I think kind of the next level we're getting to, maybe, probably not in my lifetime, but maybe in the next century or so, is right, harnessing the power of the sun, building a device called the Dyson Sphere, right, and yeah, using that as direct energy. So
Nerd.
Yeah.
So I have a little kind of a pushback on this, because the core thing with space startups and space environment and space is that everybody wants to know. Nobody asks the health. Maybe they do. I don't know. Like other startup industries, they ask, well, what is the coolest thing you can think of in the future? And I think it's kind of funny, because every space person is a space nerd, and I think we've all pretty much read everything and seen all the Star Treks, and we all that's why we're in this. So we are trying to make this crazy version of Star Trek or whatever a reality. And so I think that we all push in that direction, and we love AI, and we love manufacturing, and we want to put every possible thing on, you know, all through the solar system and all these things. So I love it, but I also hate the question. Just want to
So, by the way, if there are other questions from the audience, please, I do want to encourage people. We got about 4 minutes left, so if you got a question, please ask. I'll tell a quick story and get your reactions to it. So I represented Sierra Nevada in the bid protests between SpaceX, Boeing, Sierra Nevada for commercial resupply to the International Space Station. And I was sitting there with an astronaut, Hoot Gibson, and we were making like all these great arguments about how in the world could you pick SpaceX? They're bankrupt essentially at the time. They're using commercial parts that have no flight heritage. What else was, you know, we're talking about all these things that like and they were going to use automated docking. There was no option for a man in the loop for their docking. And so we're making these kind of arguments. And now you think about that now, and no one would rely upon a human to try to dock something. It's just too high risk, right?
Yep.
So I was on the other side of that at SpaceX, by the way, justifying to the Air Force, the government, why, yeah, we could use automotive parts. Why not, right? I mean, if you want to do this fast and repeatable, that's what you have to do. So I think the software piece is, like I was saying before, an internal thing. It's where we are going. Because of this very reason, a human is never going to be quite as good and as fast, the machine speed, the AI piece, to do some of the stuff that honestly, maybe it's cool, but a lot of it's really boring, right? Like a lot of it is not the kind of thing that the humans in the loop should be doing. We should be doing the higher cognitive things and making the bigger decisions.
Yeah, this is another story. Most people don't know, but Starlink constellations that SpaceX launches, these are disposable satellites. They use the cheapest solar, the cheapest components. They are literally disposable components. For about every constellation that goes up, they expect to lose about 10 to 15% of those satellites, meaning they don't expect them to work, right? Because they're so cheap. But that's what they have to do to make their unit economics work. And they also are planning to do a refresh in a low Earth orbit 5 constellation launches from now, so they don't need them to stay up there that long. But this disposability and this automation and this cheaper, faster, better, I'm just going to launch rockets and watch them blow up, and then I'm going to fix that, and I'm going to blow it up again, I'm going to fix that, and well, after 10 of those, it's launching every time, like it is now. So that's kind of the business we're into, rapid prototyping and cheaper, faster, better.
All right, so one last question for you. What is one big takeaway you hope the audience walks away with from our discussion today? One takeaway.
I mean, mine to the founders is you can do it. Like if you're sitting there and you've talked to 100 investors and nobody wants to fund your idea, like it's going to happen. Just keep going, keep adapting, and tweaking your pitch and all that, and believe in yourself.
Yeah, I'd say just go fast, be intentional, and network. Make a lot of friends.
I mean, I think for the veteran founders, just lean into what you've done, like lean into your veteran status and the things that you don't even know where you're gonna outshine a lot of the other startup founders who don't have that background.
Great. Can we get a round of applause, please, for our panelists?